of the human reproductive system, okay? We introduced your reproductive system, where we are able to see that it's made up of the nose and then the pharynx and the larynx, so they all connect to the windpipe, which is the trachea, and then the trachea branches into the two bronchi, which branch into fine network of bronchioles, okay? And the bronchioles, they terminate into fine sacs called alveoli. So we are able to talk about this, okay, this night, and the video is there. You can go and watch and remind yourself of what we talked about in the previous lesson. So welcome to another interesting lesson, okay, of gas exchange in man, your gaseous exchange, okay? And by the end of today, trust me, you'll be able to know how your gaseous exchange is, the basic anatomy, the basic, okay, just the basic anatomy, and how gas exchange occurs within you, right? Yes. So we are going to now I'm going to discuss two things in one. So we shall discuss the basic structure of your respiratory tract and how it is adapted. So it will be two things in one. So your respiratory tract, away from the nasal pipe, from the nose, okay, and the nasal cavity, then the pharynx and the larynx, it opens into a large tube, okay? And this large tube, it is covered by, if I'm to pause somewhere here, okay, I will pause when it reaches. It is made up of the rings that are arranged in C shape, okay? They are in C shape, and it's large enough, okay, that terminates into two branches. Okay, these are the lungs, so the windpipe is somewhere here, not down. So it terminates into two branches, okay, and held into rings of C-shaped cartilage. Think about why. They are just rings, okay, of they encircle, they surround the trachea, the windpipe. So think about why. Why should they be C-shaped? Why should they be arranged? Why should even be cartilaginous? Okay? Not a bone. Think about that. Why shouldn't it be a muscle tissue? Okay? But rather a cartilage. Why? Why? So to answer that, it requires some simple, should I say, experiment that we should perform. Think about this. Imagine you are on a table and your pen falls down, okay, and then you bend to pick your pen, not so? Or imagine you are bending down to pick something, then you're going to bend down together with the whole back, or sometimes you might bend the neck, okay? Now, if your trachea is made up of a bone, how is it going to bend? If your trachea is made up of a muscle tissue, yes, it will bend, but won't the opening be covered completely? Something of this kind. Won't this opening be covered completely? Okay? So think about that. Yes. So having made up of cartilaginous rings, okay, the rings of cartilage that span throughout, okay, span throughout. Then these rings of cartilage, they allow this trachea together with the head to bend in any orientation at any angle, to bend when this air hole is not interrupted or is not tampered with, so that you maintain that constant flow of air, but even when you are bent at different angles or different orientations. So that's why it is a ring, okay? It is made up of cartilaginous rings to prevent it from collapsing. So it's as cool as that. Then inside the trachea and the bronchi and the bronchioles, you have there the ciliated cuboidal epithelium. Okay? You have there the ciliated cuboidal epithelium. Now I'll take you back to histology. Okay? Where we studied epithelial cells. So you have there epithelial cells. Anyway, they don't have these gaps. But these ones, obviously, they are cuboidal epithelial cells, where the nucleus is in the center. Now these cells, they have cilia. So think about why. What is the cilia for? Huh? What are cilia for? Yes, trapping. Or it is even covered with a layer of mucous membrane. Too much mucus throughout the entire trachea and the bronchi, secreted by the goblet cells. So what is the mucus for? The mucus is, now the inhaled air that you take in, it has too much of dust particles, too much of microorganisms. So now the mucous membrane, it is the one that traps these small dust particles that have been inhaled together with air and some microorganisms. And when they are trapped, then this cilia or the cilia, okay, they are going to beat rhythmically in a given manner to move this trapped dust particle to move up. Okay? The larynx, where it will be coughed out or swallowed into the digestive system and broken down. So that you prevent this dust and these microbes to reach where? To reach the alveoli. Otherwise, imagine if the way we inhaled the dust, imagine in dry season, there is always too much dust, that if the school is almost near a dusty road and cars pass there, the school almost is saturated with dust. You can imagine. So the air that you inhale automatically has too much dust. Apart from right now when it's wet season, the dust particles are limited, but you have more microbes. Okay? Yes, so it should be trapped by this mucous membrane, and then the cilia that are on top of those cells, they will align, they will beat rhythmically to move this trapped particle up. And you remove it from your body, okay? Without harming you. You have numerous goblet cells, histology, where we talked about the goblet cells. And what do these cells do? They are individual cells. If you remember the pseudostratified, okay, where you have these different cells at varying heights. Within them, you had the goblet cells. Now these are specific cells, okay? These are cells that are found within an epithelium that are responsible for secretion of mucus. We have agreed that the trachea, the bronchi, and the bronchioles, they are lined by a layer of mucus. So where does this mucus come from? If you have flu, you produce a lot of mucus, too much of it. Where does the mucus come from? Okay? So there are those specific cells, the goblet cells, that do secrete that mucus that will line the walls of the trachea together with the bronchi and the bronchioles, so that any dust particle is trapped, okay, is trapped by this mucus, and then the cilia that line the walls of the bronchi, or the cilia within these cells, the ciliated epithelial cells, they beat rhythmically to put the dust up, and then you either cough it out, or you cough it, you remove it, and then you swallow in the stomach. You know that the conditions in the stomach are really harsh. You have their HCl, which is at 2. Imagine pH 2. Okay? You have their enzymes. Okay? The lytic enzymes, the proteases. So tough. Okay? So they will digest the mucus that has trapped the microbes and the dust, and you remove them from the body. So, your lungs, it has smooth muscles, okay? And there is also a connective tissue with elastic and collagen fiber. Why do you have to do that? What is it for? Imagine, we say that for you to inhale, the lungs do expand. These air sacs do expand. The rib cage moves outwards and upwards. Okay? So why should you have these collagen fibers, these elastic and the collagen fibers, which are tough, so that as the lung is expanding, then it doesn't overexpand and it bursts. Okay? Yes, you expand, but with a given limit. Okay? Yes. So that's why it is elastic, to be able to expand, but surrounded by these stiff collagen fibers, so that you don't expand beyond the limit. Then the lungs themselves, they have numerous air sacs. They have a dense network of blood capillaries that are branches of pulmonary artery and vein. They are enclosed by the two membrane, the inner pleural membrane and the outer pleural membrane. Now there are these membranes. Now, between the two membranes, you have there the pleural cavity. Okay? And the pleural cavity is filled with water. It is fluid filled, not only water. So that you don't have that direct contact between the lungs and the ribs. Okay? But the ribs can influence the lungs to contract or the lungs to relax. Okay? Then enclosed in the space known as the pleural cavity that contains fluid, which lubricates the lungs for free movements. So basically, that's how simple, that's how basic your respiratory system is. In case there are queries, it's okay, you can ask. Okay, so if there are no questions, then we can briefly talk about these different cavities. Okay, and let's begin with the nose. And like the entire system, the nose also, they are lined by ciliated epithelial cells. Why? Because you have cilia. If you have a look in your nose, you find there hair. Okay, so the nose is also lined by the cilia, so that you trap the dust that is entering with air. And then you also have their goblet cells. What do goblet cells do? Secrete mucus. What does mucus do? To trap the dust and the microbes that will enter, okay, along with air. So that the air that reaches the alveoli is really clean air. Then when the cilia have finally trapped, then they are going to beat rhythmically, okay, hence removing the materials from the air. So the nasal cavity, it is really filled with the cilia. In the mucus, you trap the foreign body that comes along with the inspired air. Now the mucus, it also moistens the inspired air. Imagine such a dry air that you're going to inhale. Should it reach the alveoli when it is still dry like the way it is? Obviously no. So when I was young, I used to hate mucus, but I think now mucus is good. If you have flu, I think it's better your nose to have enough mucus, so that the mucus will trap anything that is entering. Okay? Maybe one of the problems is that they tend to grow the airways, so that you get issues to do with breathing. Then the air obviously will come when it's cold. Okay? Because you're not sure of the environment that is surrounding you. Whereby if the room temperature is so down, if the area is cold, then the air that is entering into your nose, it will also be cold. Okay? And so what does that mean? It will have an impact on your internal environment. So to avoid that, then this air must be warmed, okay, even before it reaches the alveoli. And so the blood capillaries that are passing through the nose, okay, that are supplying in the nasal cavity, they are the ones that will bring in the warm blood that will warm the air that is entering into the nose. So that by the time the air reaches the alveoli, its body temperature, it is warmed enough. It is warmed enough not to impact the internal environment, so that when it is absorbed into blood, it won't have that much impact, okay, on the temperature of blood. And the posterior lobe is full of the olfactory cells that do sense smell. And we studied coordination. And I think I gave you one of the assignments as to find out how smell is detected, how that smell can be transduced into a nerve impulse. And then after being transduced into a nerve impulse, and then the impulse will be transported, will be transmitted to the brain for further interpretation. So that's why you are able to smell something. You are cooking, and then in the kitchen, you are in the sitting room, and you are able to feel the aroma. And you'll be like, oh, okay? For us, when we were still young, we would detect that this jackfruit plant has some ripe ones. by a mere smell. So you just stand down and then you detect a smell. So how are you able? Because of the cells that are found in the nasal cavity. Then we have the alveolar ducts and alveolar sacs. Now these ones, we say that the trachea from the larynx, the trachea is going to terminate into, so if this is our trachea, it will terminate into the bronchi, and then the bronchi, they will also terminate into a fine network, okay? A fine network of tubes. And these tubes are called bronchioles. Now these bronchioles, also towards the end, they also now these bronchioles, they are also C-shaped, they are cartilaginous. Even the bronchi, they are also cartilaginous. But towards the end, they form non-cartilaginous tubes that terminate directly into the air sacs, the alveoli. Now these non-cartilaginous tubes, they are the ones that we refer to as alveolar ducts. Okay? Yes. So these ducts, they don't have any cartilage, and they are non-ciliated, and they do lack the goblet cells. They are elastic. They are covered by both the elastic fiber to be able to stretch and regain its shape, and collagen fiber, so that when you stretch, you don't overstretch. Okay? You stretch but within your limits. Then the alveoli, obviously these are sacs. Okay? These are sites where gas exchange is going to occur from. Okay? And they are made up of simple squamous epithelial cells. It's just one single layer of simple squamous epithelial cells, together with other cells. We have type 1 and type 2 cells. We are going to talk about them. Type 1 and type 2 cells. Type 2 cells. So in addition to type 1 and type 2, so in addition to type 1, which are the simple squamous epithelial cells, then you also have the type 2 cells. And all these cells, they play an important role as far as gas exchange is concerned. Okay? That you're not supposed to lose any cell. So these air sacs, they are numerous, like how you saw from the other previous picture. There are very many in our bodies, and they are always moist with a dense network of blood capillaries and with a thin respiratory membrane, or surrounded by a thin respiratory membrane. Imagine, it's just one cell thick. And even the cell, not just any cell, but simple squamous epithelial cells. So you can imagine how thin it is. And so that one allows these alveoli to be fully permeable to respiratory gases and to offer little or negligible resistance to these respiratory gases, so that they can easily cross, okay, across the walls of the alveoli. We shall talk about the cells, okay, so have no worries. Then for the larynx, so you can have a look at our alveoli. So for the larynx, there are two sets of horizontal or horizontally aligned fibroelastic cartilages called vocal cords. And there are these vocal cords that vibrate when expired air passes over them to produce sound. So these ones, they are specialized. This is a specialized structure. Okay? Specialized structure within the neck region. Okay? Within the larynx. It is made up of two fibroelastic cartilages. They are cartilage, but they can vibrate, not that stiff. So that when you are expiring air, then these cartilages will be able to vibrate, and if they vibrate, then they will be able to produce sound. That in higher animals, or in animals, some animals, that the vibrations can occur in a coordinated manner, so that you give sounds with some fluency, like how I am speaking. I can speak and you hear and you respond accordingly. Okay? So it is an advancement as far as mammals are concerned, or human beings are concerned. Then the trachea and the bronchi, we talked about them, have goblet cells. They are also ciliated, and the walls are made up of C-shaped cartilage, which provide mechanical strength to the walls. But the walls, the trachea, together with the bronchi, should remain widely open when the neck is bent, or when it is at high tension during inspiration. So you bend the neck and you still keep breathing in. How is that even possible? It is because you have these cartilages that are C-shaped, which creates that hole that allows an interrupted flow of air. Then the bronchioles, it's a fine network. The walls have irregular shaped plates of cartilage at the narrow ends, and they lack cartilage but have smooth muscles and elastic fibers. They have the goblet cells, and they also have the cilia, and so they are also surrounded with mucus. Then with your alveoli, you can have a look. It's really a dense network of sacs. Dense network of sacs. That these sacs are really adapted to perform gas exchange, to carry out gas exchange. Otherwise, if you didn't have these air sacs, then there is no way how your lungs would be able to carry out gas exchange. Okay? To sufficiently carry out gas exchange to meet your energy demands. Remember, your body demands too much energy, and enough energy is produced from aerobic respiration, whereby you need oxygen to oxidize the food completely to carbon dioxide and water, so that you can release enough energy. And so to do that, the lungs cannot do that. The lungs cannot achieve the supply of oxygen. And neither oxygen can diffuse just from the external to your body. So therefore, you must have some specialized structures, okay, that will carry out gas exchange to meet the high energy demands. And so, these are our air sacs. That there are very many sacs in your body, that if you consider the surface area of air sacs in one individual, okay? If you consider the surface area of air sacs of one individual, it is equivalent to the tennis court Now if you get this tennis court and you put it in the whole stadium, okay? So the surface area is equivalent to the surface area of this tennis court. Now you can imagine people that sit in the entire pitch, okay? If you get this court, and you put it in the pitch. Now one player like this brings the alveoli with a surface area that is equivalent to a tennis court. Now you can imagine the people that sit in the pitch. How much surface area will it be there in the pitch? And so, if you are to put these courts vertically or laterally, for instance, you put one court here, you put another court here, you put another one here, another one, to fill the number of people in a tennis in the pitch, you can imagine the area that you need. But all that area is limited within just one single run. And so there are very many sacs within the lungs that do carry out gas exchange. And so because of that, and they are efficient respiratory surfaces. So efficient that you have never complained of oxygen and carbon dioxide. So they are numerous, very thin squamous epithelium, fully permeable, and have a dense network of capillaries. I hope you can see that. Then they have squamous simple epithelium, which gives it a thin permeable epithelium that increases the rate of diffusion. So like this one is repeated. They are well ventilated. Okay? They are connected directly to the alveolar tubes, and each alveolar tube is connected to a bronchiole, and then each bronchiole is connected to the bronchi, to the trachea, and to the nose. So they are well aerated that at any particular time t, then this alveoli will always receive enough air and it will always give away the carbon dioxide that they do accumulate. It will always be given away. Now these epithelial cells, they do have elastic fibers. Apart from having the collagen fibers which are stiff, you have their elastic fibers, so that the air sacs are able to stretch. Okay? Because these air sacs also do stretch. Imagine when they are pushing out air. They stretch so that they push air out. But imagine when they're expanding. They must expand so that air enters. Now that ability to expand, it's because they do have these elastic fibers. Not so? To expand so that volume inside increases and then air enters, you must have the elastic fibers in your basement membranes so that you can easily expand and regain your shape. Otherwise, if the basement membrane were just stiff collagen fibers, then I don't know, okay, what would happen. So endothelium of blood vessel outside is very thin, yes. The respiratory membrane, the endothelium, if you have this as your blood capillary, and then this as your simple squamous epithelium of the alveolus, then everything is thin. The endothelium of the capillary is very thin. Even the membrane of the alveolus is very thin, so that gases can easily diffuse. The diffusion distance between the two the air in the alveolus and the blood, the distance is very small, that the rate at which diffusion is going to occur is going to be high. Then the hemoglobin that is present in the cells, in the red blood cells, it also plays an important part as far as gas exchange is concerned. Any queries, guys? Please ask. So from that simple preview of your airways, your gas exchange apparatus, let's talk about the alveolus indeed. Let's try to magnify a bit. Let's try to scan through the alveolus and see what it is. Okay? Now, the alveolus is made up of two types of cells. Two types of cells. And they are named as type 1 and type 2 cells. Now, the type 1 cells, they are the abundant cells. They are the numerous cells. Very many cells. Okay? And they are the ones that we actually know. Okay? Let's talk about this slowly. They are the ones that we actually know. So the type 1 cells, they are the simple, okay, the squamous cells. The simple squamous epithelial cells. And remember, if you remember your histology so well, that you have this as the basement membrane, okay? And then on the basement membrane, you have there some specialized cells. And these specialized cells, they are really flattened. Okay? They are really flattened. And they are thin enough. They are thin enough and really flattened. Somebody with a query? Because somebody unmuted. Whereby this is a basement membrane. Okay? And then this is our cell. So now these are the type 1 epithelial cells. And because of their appearance, you can see they are really thin. Thin. So it reduces the diffusion distance, okay, over which gases are going to diffuse, okay, so that you maintain an efficient rate of diffusion across the alveolus. But now, on addition to these type 1 cells, we also have another specialized type of cells. And these ones, they are the type 2 cells. Okay? Now, these type 2 cells, they are large, the distance is so big, boom, that diffusion cannot take place across these cells. And so they also do account for the alveolar dead space, if you have ever heard of that one. If you have never, then we shall talk about it. They do account for the alveolar dead space. This is a space where exchange cannot occur within the alveolus. Not the entire alveolus can carry out exchange, no. There are some parts, okay, where gas exchange cannot take place from. For instance, the exchange of gases. You cannot exchange gases between such a cell, okay? It doesn't permit any exchange of gases between the surrounding blood capillaries, okay, and the internal or the inside of the alveolus. But now, so then you should be asking that then why should they be, since they cannot permit exchange of gases? Why should they be there? Now the why it is they perform an important part. Another important part, okay, in the alveolus. So they are granular and roughly cuboidal in shape, and they are progenitors for type 1 cells. That if these type 1 cells, these squamous simple epithelial cells, if maybe they were worn out or something happened, then these cells, they can give rise, okay, to these type 1 cells. That is one function, one good function. But that is just secondary, okay? That one is not primary. That's not a primary function. Why? These cells are in your alveolus. The primary function is to secrete a surfactant. And then you should be asking yourself that what are these surfactants? What is it? What is it even? And what does it do? Do we have surfactants in our lungs? If they are there, what do they do there? Okay? Are they useful or they are useless? Now, obviously, the fact that it is in your alveolus, then it's useful. Okay? So these type 2 cells, they do secrete surfactants. Now, a surfact, we are going to talk about it, I think, in the next slide. Okay? We are going to talk about it. Let me just say they do secrete surfactants. Okay? But these surfactants are really important. Important. Important, like how I've said it. That somebody carried out a research to kids that do not produce surfactants when they are still young. And he was able to find out that the kids were not able to grow. Why? Because their alveoli didn't have the surfactants, so they were not able to supply the body with oxygen. Okay? And she was a lady, she came up with that condition and she named it. It is RDS. It is respiratory distress syndrome. We are going to see, we are going to talk about it. We are going to talk about it, have no worries. Then they do absorb sodium ions and water, preventing them from building up within the air sacs. Yes, if you keep releasing the sodium ions within this solution, then it means you keep absorbing water, okay, into this space. That imagine if water reaches here, how much air would be in contact with the tissues? How much? So to avoid water from accumulating, then these type 1 cells, they will keep absorbing, okay, the sodium ions from this tissue fluid, from this solution, so that you maintain, yes, just a layer of moisture that just surrounds these cells. And you know, a layer of moisture increases the rate of diffusion. You know that better, not so? Yes. Then another type of cells, now this is under type 2 cells. They are the macrophages, and these ones, they can engulf anything, maybe apart from coronavirus. But they can engulf anything that crosses into the alveolus. And they must be there. They must be there. Okay? Otherwise, if your alveolar cells don't have the type 2, then anytime it becomes hard. So when you inhale in that air, it will come in with its microbes, and the microbes will be engulfed by these macrophages and removed from the air, so that the alveolus, the air sac, is not interrupted. Let's talk about surfactants. Surfactants. Now, from my little English, I used to think surfactants comes from suffocate, okay? Comes from suffocate, and maybe they cause us to suffocate. Yeah, but maybe you might be true that surfactant comes from suffocate, but they don't cause suffocation. In fact, if they are not present, then that's when you suffer, you become suffocated. You won't be able to get enough air to meet your energy demand, and so you die of RDS, respiratory distress syndrome. So these surfactants, they are lipoprotein molecules, okay? They are surface active phospholipoprotein molecule with two heads. One head is hydrophilic and another head is hydrophobic, okay? And it is formed by the type 2 alveolar cells. A moment. And they actually perform some important part. They perform, they are so important. Imagine, let's, before we even go far, you have a look at this. This is a tube, and the tube is connected to a sac. Not so? Now, now, let's say it's a balloon. Let me use a balloon. This is a balloon, and the balloon is connected to a sac. Okay? Let me illustrate it from here. Did I say a sac? The balloon is connected to a tube.
True.
Yes? Now, if you come here up, maybe the tube is long enough, and just the tube is long enough. So when you hold here and you blow in air, so this is you. I don't know. Jordan? Which Jordan? Maybe Jordan Mark? Maybe Jordan? But this is you. When you blow in air, isn't this going to expand? Isn't it going to expand? It will expand, of course. Okay? It will expand. But when you just hear same you, and now instead of blowing in air, okay, you suck the air from the balloon. You suck the air from the balloon. What will happen? Won't the walls of this balloon collapse? Won't they collapse? Yes. It will. The walls will collapse, and the balloon will become deflated. Something. Okay? The balloon will become deflated. That it will become hard for you to blow again this air to regain this specific shape. It will become hard. And so you think it in that dimension. And this actually has never happened within your alveoli. Otherwise, if it happens, then you die. Yes, it is true. These sacs, they do contract. These numerous sacs, they do contract, okay, to push out the air. And I said it. But if they contract, they should have a limit, okay? Otherwise, if they do it, then they will become deflated, and it will take too much energy to inflate them again, okay? To inflate them again. So to avoid that, then the type 2 cells in the alveoli secrete a given fluid called a surfactant that prevents your alveoli from collapsing. Not so? That prevent your alveoli from collapsing. And how do they do it? Like we said, they have two heads. The surfactant, it's a phospholipid. You can have a look at this. Okay? With a hydrophilic protein head or phospho head, phosphate depending, and hydrophilic lipid tail. Okay? Now, because of that, having both groups, I hope right now you know what hydrophilic and hydrophobic is. So when this lipoprotein is secreted, okay, it will make interaction between the air and water interface, whereby it will get absorbed, whereby the hydrophilic head or heads, they will be absorbed onto the water and the tails will be oriented in air. Okay? I hope that one is okay. Like how you see this arrangement. And if I take you back to the alveolus, you can see this is a layer of water surrounding the walls of the air sacs. So you have a layer of moisture, okay, this one, and you have there the surfactants, our lipoprotein molecules, these ones. Maybe I try to magnify a bit. Let me try to zoom in. Yes. So I mean these ones. You get it? So that's how they get absorbed. Okay? Where the heads, they are oriented towards the water, and the tails, they orient themselves away from water because they are hydrophobic. And so this arrangement, it's good, so good, that these surfactants, they will lower the surface tension of the liquid that is lining the alveolus. If you, when they are adsorbed on the water air interface, they are going to lower the surface tension, okay, of the liquid that lines the alveolus. And remember, with surface tension, if you pour water in glass, water forms the lower meniscus. Okay? Water forms the lower meniscus. So as a result, if this is your alveolus, okay? If this is your alveolus, and this is a layer of moisture, a layer of water, because of high surface tension between water molecules, they may end up attracting each other. The water molecules will end up attracting each other, hence drawing these walls of the alveolus inside. As a result, it will collapse. And if the alveolus collapses, then there is no way how it is going to be inflated. And if it's not inflated, then you suffocate and you die. Okay? Yes. But if you lower the surface tension, then the alveoli, they will remain within their original shape and position, so that you just breathe in air. You don't add efforts again to inflate the alveoli. They will remain with their original position, with their own space, so that you just breathe in. You just breathe in. And when you want to breathe out, they just contract a bit and you push air out. When you want to breathe in, they just relax a bit, the volume expands, and the pressure decreases below the atmospheric pressure, and air enters the lungs. but with maintaining their original positions. Not so. Yes. So, guys, that is the basic anatomy, okay, of the respiratory tract in man. Respiratory system, respiratory apparatus in man. And if you've been keen enough, we've talked about the respiratory apparatus or apparatus of different organisms. Well, we talked about the earthworms and how it is arranged. Then we talked about insects and how it is. Then fish, you remember, both the pteroists and chondrichthyes. Then from fish, we talked about birds, you remember, and you can remember how it is, okay? And then from birds, then we are on mammals, man, okay? And other mammals, where man is a bona fide mammal, okay? Yes. So let's talk about gas exchange in mammals or in man. And gas exchange begins with ventilation, whereby with ventilation, it's a process by which there is continuous exchange of respiratory gases, or the continuous exchange of respiratory gases is maintained across the respiratory surfaces. Imagine, yes, gases exchange, but yours, unlike other organisms such as earthworms and amoeba, the respiratory surface is close to the environment. Okay? But yours, the alveoli are just inside your body. So there must be ways of ventilating these respiratory surfaces. There must be ways of filling these surfaces with air so that exchange occurs. Okay? So the process by which these gas exchange surfaces are supplied with air and then air removed, the air that is supposed to be removed is ventilation. So the rate at which you breathe in and out in 1 minute is a ventilation rate. We count how many breaths have you successfully made, okay, in 1 minute. It's a cycle. You breathe in, in, in 1 minute, okay? Then it determines a ventilation rate. And this rate varies, by the way, with age, the state of activity, the health status of an organism, the environment to which an organism is. It varies depending on the need of oxygen at a particular moment. For instance, not even assuming, a man in a vigorous exercise, for instance, Usain Bolt, you all know Usain Bolt, in that moment when he's sprinting, okay, and then that moment before sprinting, are the ventilation rates the same? And after sprinting, are the rates the same? Obviously, no, they are not the same. So basing on the need of oxygen at a particular moment, then it determines how much the rate is going to be. Okay? Yes. So that process by which the respiratory surfaces are inflated and deflated, in quotes if they are not appropriate, is what we call ventilation. So it involves two mechanisms, and the mechanisms I've already talked about them. The first one is inhalation, and with inhalation, this is a process of taking in the respiratory gases. Okay? Or you can call it inspiration, depending on what is easy for you. So you can say inhalation or inhalation or inspiration, depending on what is easy for you. And this one involves taking in gases to the respiratory surfaces. Then with exhalation, this is taking out. Taking out of respiratory gases. Or you can call it expiration. Away from the respiratory gases. And those are the two mechanisms. And really, you guys, you must know these mechanisms. This is some simple concept. Something easy. I should not really confuse you. Okay? Yes, that's brilliant. So let's talk about inhalation. And as you are watching these pics, they are pictures, I want you to do the same. Breathe in, and then you breathe out. Breathe in, and then you breathe out. As you are observing the changes. Breathe in and out. Breathe in and out. As you are observing. Okay? And what you are observing, it is exactly the science. There is no rocket science here. Okay? We have no rocket science here. Everything happens within you. But that's why I like biology. Biology is easy because you study what is happening within you. And sometimes I be like, if it was possible, if I was God, then I'll be like, whatever you fail to talk about, I stop it there and then from happening. If I say describe the process of inhalation and exhalation, and then you fail to talk about inhalation and exhalation, I first cease, I first stop the process from occurring for something like 2 minutes. But anyway, that is being brutal. That would be so brutal. So you can have a look. I hope you did it. Breathe in. Just take a deep breath as you are holding your chest. Take, and then take out. So did you feel how the chest was moving? Yes. So those are the movements that we shall account for here. Okay? And let's start with inhalation. Now, with inhalation or inspiration, it means taking in air inside the body. So, like the Boyle's law, of course, pressure and volume, they are inversely proportional. Okay? Pressure and volume are inversely proportional. That is Boyle's law. For you to move air in, the concept is one before you even go far. For you to be able to move air in, then the pressure inside must be lower than the pressure outside, the atmospheric pressure, so that air freely moves inside your body, the lungs. And similarly, for you to move air outside your lungs, then the pressure inside the lungs must be higher than the atmospheric pressure, so that air is pushed out. And those are the two concepts. Then if you understand that basic, then trust me, then what you need to know is how is it then achieved. So in our not very first lesson, but the lesson where we introduced gas exchange in mammals, man, we talked about the two antagonistic sets of muscles that do the in the chest, the ribs. They actually do attach on the ribs. Whereby those that attach externally on the ribs, they are the external intercostal muscles. And those that attach internally on the rib cage, they are the internal intercostal muscles. Now there are these muscles that contract antagonistically to bring about movement of the rib cage. Like how you can see, this is just an exposed rib cage, but bones can't move on their own. Okay? Bones can't move on their own. So these bones, the rib cage, the ribs, they must have muscles attached that to bring about. And those muscles are the external and the internal intercostal muscles. Okay? Now, during inspiration, the external, this outside, the ones attached outside, the external intercostal muscles contract and the internal intercostal muscles relax. And remember the other concept I gave you as far as locomotion is concerned. When a muscle contracts, it shortens and becomes stiff. But when a muscle relaxes, it lengthens and becomes loose. Let me use that word. So when the external intercostal muscles contract, these ones, the one on the outside, okay? When they contract, they will shorten. Remember it attaches here up to here, and it also attaches here up to here. So it will shorten, okay? This one will shorten, and this one will also shorten and become stiff. But the inside, the internal, they will elongate, they will lengthen and become stiff. So therefore, this one will pull, okay, the rib cage to move upwards, okay, and outwards. So when the external intercostal muscles contract, then the rib cage moves outwards and upwards. That is some simple concept if you understand what I've just told you. Then the next thing that happens, at the base, you have there some stiff muscle. I think it's a smooth muscle. You can fact check that. I think it's a smooth muscle that contracts and relaxes. Now it's like this, okay? And the concept is still one. When a muscle contracts, okay, it becomes short and stiff. But when a muscle relaxes, then it lengthens. Okay? Now, if you want to put in air in the lungs, if you want to inflate the lungs, then the aim is to increase the volume in the lungs and decrease pressure below the atmospheric pressure so that air is drawn where? In the lungs. So what happens? Our muscle here, if a muscle contracts, it shortens, that principle. And when it shortens, it becomes straight. And when it becomes straight, then the volume in the chest cavity is going to increase. You can have a look. If it is here, if the diaphragm is here and it has straightened, then the volume is going to increase in the chest cavity. But if it relaxes, then its length is going to increase, but it cannot fit. This one will be rigid, and this one also will be rigid. So if it increases, then it will be forced to bend upwards and gain a dome shape. Okay? That's brilliant. So therefore, since we want to enter, we want to push in air, then the diaphragm must contract. And when it contracts, it flattens. It becomes flat. And when the diaphragm flattens, then what happens? The volume in the chest cavity is going to increase. Okay? You can have a look. The volume is going to increase. And by Boyle's law, if volume increases, then pressure does what? Pressure decreases. And if pressure decreases below the atmospheric pressure, or even the lungs are going to expand. Okay? As you are doing all this, remember lungs are made up of elastic fibers. Okay? The lungs are made up of elastic fibers. So the lungs are also going to expand, and the volume inside the lungs, together with our alveoli, the volume is going to increase, and pressure therefore decreases. And if pressure decreases below the atmospheric pressure, then air is going to draw into the lungs through the nasal pipes or through the nostrils, then into the nasal cavity, into the pharynx. Then the glottis closes, it opens, it doesn't close, it closes when you're swallowing. Then into the larynx, finally trachea, then into the bronchi, remember those that branch. Then from bronchi into a fine network of bronchioles, then into the alveolar ducts. And finally, air makes it into the alveoli, the gas exchange surface. Okay? The gas exchange surface. And when air makes it into the alveoli, then it won't stay there. The oxygen will dissolve into the layer of moisture that you saw. And when oxygen dissolves there, it will simply diffuse across a thin and highly permeable respiratory membrane into the blood capillaries. Where in the blood capillaries, the oxygen will combine with the hemoglobin to form oxyhemoglobin and transport it to the tissues for tissue respiration. And in the tissues, you have respiration, produce carbon dioxide, and then the carbon dioxide, it will diffuse out of the tissues into the capillaries, combined with from carboxyhemoglobin, transported to the lungs. That is transport. Okay? And then in the lungs, into this fine network of capillaries, the carbon dioxide will diffuse into the alveoli and then marks the beginning of exhalation. So it's as simple as that. And with exhalation, guys, here you want to expel air out of your body. You want to push out air outside your body. And the concept is simple. Okay? Sorry. The concept is simple. Pressure inside must build up above the atmospheric pressure so that air is expelled forcefully outside your body. And how is this achieved? The reverse of what we've just talked about. So therefore, the internal intercostal muscles will contract and external will relax, those which are attached inside. So they will pull the rib cage to move inwards and downwards. It is inwards. You see, breathe in, it is moving up but out. This, wish I can, but you can see how it moves. It is both in and down. When you are breathing in, it moves both up and outwards. Okay? Yes. So if you understand that concept, then you'll be cool. You'll be kawa. That you'll be in position to attempt any query. Then what will happen to the diaphragm muscle? This time round it will relax and become dome-shaped. You can have a look at this during exhalation. You can. The whole of this is the diaphragm. Okay? Now you are inhaling. You can see. Now you are going to exhale. Yes, you can see. So if the diaphragm relaxes and becomes dome-shaped, then the lungs would contract again. Okay? The lungs will contract again. So the volume in the chest cavity is going to reduce. Oh, the volume is going to increase. Sorry. The volume is going to reduce and pressure is going to increase way above the atmospheric pressure. And so what will happen? You're going to push the air out. The lungs will recoil as pressure increases above the atmospheric pressure, and you push air out. So air that is rich in carbon dioxide to be expelled out of the alveoli through the alveolar tubes, then the bronchioles, and then to the bronchi. Now it is a reversal order. You know, when there is some function, let's say there is some function, some important function. Let's say government in 7 comes this. Yeah, you know. After everything, then they'll be like, you people, we shall go out of this hall in a reverse order. Meaning those that enter the last, they are the ones that will move out first. Think about it. So also here it is a reversal order, where from alveoli you join the alveolar tubes, and then you make it to the bronchioles, and then the bronchioles, they will terminate and all collect in the bronchi, and the 2 bronchi, they will all collect their gases into the trachea, and the trachea to the larynx, and then the glottis opens, and then you make it to the pharynx, to the nasal cavity, boom, to the outside environment. Okay? And you have exhaled your air out. So think about, this is just a reading assignment. Read about how these muscles are controlled, how respiration is controlled. Okay? Yeah, control of respiration by the nervous system. How? So you can read about it. Otherwise, guys, then it's okay. We can call it a day. Thanks for attending. By the way, you can subscribe. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. Okay? And we grow in numbers. Or you can also share to your friends, by the way, so that they don't get stuck as far as lockdown is concerned. Otherwise, let's call it a day.